Theresa May was picked to be leader of the Conservative Party for the reason of being boring. She was there to sort of calm the markets, to steady the ship, whatever, and turns out that isn't such a good strategy when you're trying to sell a vision in an election.
It's very difficult if you were to go back and renegotiate on the back of this amendment, because having taken no deal off the table, she's left with very little to bargain with. There's not much in her negotiating hand left. And it's unlikely that she'd be able to get a better deal without that option of saying, I can walk away if we're not given something good enough.
Unless a trade deal can be agreed.
Exactly.
However, what you do as soon as you enter into that backstop is you give away all of your cards to the EU. You can no longer withhold money from them because we've given it over. You can no longer withhold the prospect of no deal because we're locked in this backstop that you can't exit from. So how are you going to negotiate a better deal if you've thrown away all of your cards that could leverage you to that point?
That's true, isn't it, Nikki?
I don't think they can't be reconciled at all. We saw just 2 weeks ago both sides coming together under what was termed the Malthouse Compromise. You had both Jacob Rees-Mogg, an ardent Brexiteer, and an ardent Remainer like Nicky Morgan sitting at the table thrashing out a compromise that the whole party united behind.
And now she's saying that somehow Theresa May's Conservative Party is too right-wing. Theresa May's Conservative Party has ended austerity and abandoned many of the decisions that were taken under Cameron. It's objectively to the left of the previous Cameron government.
It's a nonsense. What Theresa May should have done on Thursday was not taken the beating that she took from the European Union. She should have stood up, walked out of that conference and said, right, we're preparing for no deal, and if you don't want no deal EU, you come talk to me, not vice versa.
Labour flooded Wandsworth and indeed Westminster and many central London councils with activists, hundreds of Momentum activists. They threw the kitchen sinks at these places, and seats and councils simply didn't fall.
It's so important that we leave this tricky situation that the country is facing right now with incredibly divisive politics. We've heard it from protesters surrounding us today. I don't want that to go on for years and years to come. I want us to have a final decision that we made in 2016 respected and enacted. The politicians told us they would respect it and enact it.
That doesn't change the fact that there is a limited amount of money to spend. And to spend £11.5 billion on abolishing tuition fees would, as you said, only benefit the richest in society.
And if we start saying some people's votes matter more than others, we get into very dangerous territory. Really, this is the NUS doing what it does best, saying that some people should have their voices no platformed, that some people's voices don't matter, and that actually their votes and voices matter more. Well, actually, I think that's quite an arrogant view to have. What we need to do is accept that the vast majority of people in this country are outward-looking and global in their perspective, and we need to make Brexit work for that, and that doesn't mean more endless referendums until people get the right answer. That means coming together as one nation and building that brighter future that we can all see.
A mutually beneficial deal is good for the UK and it's good for the EU, and level heads will prevail if we just stick to our guns. This government has not been strong enough, not realised the strength of its position as the 5th largest economy in the world, as the largest trading partner for the EU. The Brexit Secretary hasn't been negotiating Brexit. It's been in the hands of people who voted Remain. And so, of course, they'll view it as a damage limitation exercise, not as an opportunity.
Also, it's important to note that 80% of the UK economy is domestic, about 10% is non-EU and about 10% is EU. So we shouldn't let the 10% of EU trade regulate the 90% of non-EU trade. And really, if we want to create jobs and opportunities and growth, we have this huge opportunity to be world-leading in the kind of regulation that we set domestically.
Whether you voted Leave or Remain, we can't stand in the middle of the road. We'll get hit by traffic on both sides.
A lot of the arguments about votes at 16, in fact, almost all of them, can actually be applied to 12-year-olds. You might say that 12-year-olds aren't allowed to buy alcohol, buy cigarettes, drive,
get married,
fight for their country, marry without permission, all of these things, but that's true of 16-year-olds as well.
And you say that the people got it wrong and that we have to go again. Really, this is undermining trust in democratic institutions.
It is the law of the land that we're leaving on the 29th of March 2019. If nothing happens, we leave the EU. Parliament voted to leave the EU. The people voted for the EU. 80% of the people voted for parties that said we're going to leave the EU, and now you want to throw all of that away. It's extraordinary. The contempt that your campaign has for the wishes of people of this country. Oh, they're too stupid. They didn't understand. Everything's changed. Well, actually, the fact of the matter is that the people that you all point to that say no deal is going to be a disaster are the same people who said that voting to leave the EU would be a disaster. And it hasn't been. Employment's up. Wages are up. We're seeing FDI at record levels.
OK, with that, we must give way to the Prime Minister.
if we don't deal with climate change, that generation will be more affected than 9.
And 12-year-olds will be even more affected.
Sure,
so, and
but
6-year-olds even more affected.
But generally speaking,